Zok Tehillah Gemara. So yesterday we learned that really the Torah did not have to mention specifically each one of the Nezikin, because with a Memetzinu from Bor and any one of the other Mazikin, we would have been able to derive all the other Ovis Nezikin. So why did the Torah go to the lengths to mention each one individually? Because in each case where the Torah mentions one of the Nezikin, it's teaching us a specific halacha about it. So, for instance, the reason why the Torah mentions shor beferish is to make a distinction between tam and the muad, where a tam pays chati nezach migufay and shalom min aliyah. Shein v'regel were stated in the pasuk to tell us ubir b'steyacher. It's only chayiv b'rshus hanizik, not in b'rshus harabim. Bor is stated beferish either to tell us that you're not mechuyev for damages to kalim in the bar, or you're not mechuyev for damages to a person. If a person falls into a bar and gets injured, and the adam is to be mechayev adam hamazik adam with nezek tsar ripo yishevas and boishes, and eish either is to teach us that taman beish is potter, or if you hold taman beish is chayev, it's to teach us that you're chayev not only if the eish consumes something, burns it up, but oyasoda, even if it just singes or hardens the earth, that's also a damage that's collectible. That's also, I think, what's referred to as a tort. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter, right on the top of the Vav Amar Aleph. We're soon going to get into a little bit of a diversion from focusing on the mazik, and we're going to focus more on the payment. But we're still earlier in the Mishnah. Hatzara Shavash Shabahan. What do all of the mazikin have in common? Dakon lahazik ushmirason alecha. Whenever the Mishnah makes such a generalization, it's always because there'll be something else that will be included by the generalization that would not have been included just by listing the specifics, the four others. So the question is, what extra type of damage is the Mishnah trying to also include in the halacha that you have to pay for? Amar Abaye l'suye avnoi sakinoi umasoi. If someone left his package, his bundle, shenichem b'rosh kagoi, he left it at the top of his roof, v'naflu b'ruch matzuya, and it fell in a ruch matzuya, v'zikoy, and it did damage. So let's see what category this might have otherwise fit into. Because if it fits into any of the categories that we've already discussed, then we can't use Hatzala Shava Shabahen Losuye. So Hechidam, if the packages that I left on my roof, and I should have tied them down because there's normal wind that could blow them over. We refer to a case where someone was driving a utility truck and didn't properly tie down his shovels, right? So if it bounces off the truck and it smashes into something, Hainu Eish, that would be more like Eish, because Rashi says, they told her the Eishi, the Maishna Eish Mino. What's the difference between a fire that I didn't properly tie down or a shovel? Thank you so much. Or a shovel that I didn't properly tie down. It's not just my negligence, there's also wind involved in transporting the damage. Haninami koyach achar ma'ur. So this avnus dekinim masoi is really eish. So that can't be what the atara shavash shabahan is loyasui. Ma'ishneish the koyach achar ma'ur boy umamoincha ushmirasa elacha. Haninami koyach achar ma'ur ben umamoincha ushmirasa elacha. Vel lebosa denaich. It must be that it fell off the roof, it fell somewhere, and then maski b'hen shor oichamor or husku b'hen shor chamor after it fell to the ground. So, Gemara, let's analyze this. Idav Karinu, if you were mafker these things, so then Bein L'Rav, Bein L'Shmuel, Hainu Bar. That's classified as a bar. Rashi, Hainu Bar, the Tarvayu Amri, everybody agrees, both Rav and Shmuel, Kol Takol Shehifkir, any type of menace to society, that you were mafker, how do we know that you have to pay for any damage that it causes? Nafkalon mi bar. We learn it directly out of bar, the chayiv. The bar who b'shus harabim. The same way that the chayiv of a bar is in b'shus harabim, that hefker, right? A bar b'shus harabim is always hefker. You don't own the property. Kedamim beper shar shenagir chasapara. Kal iske kriya upesicha ba'aloi. You're not mechuyev for the damages caused by a bar because you own it, because in fact you don't. It's because you made a ma'aseh to dig it out. Therefore, afkol takaloso shehivkir, any type of menace that you have anywhere that you were mafkir, chayiv will be just like a bar. So namit chilas asiyos and leaving something in an area where it can be blown off with a ruach mitzuya, that's set up for trouble. The havalei lasuka daiti the soifer lipal baruch mitzuya. When you left something on the roof, not properly fastened down, as we use in legalese, you ought to have known that this would have happened. So, frekt mahainu bar, mashna bar shekain chilas asiyos lenesek umamoincha, and it's your money. And here also some of the Rishonim say shouldn't apply to mammon because you're a mafkir. Ushmiras nalecha, and it's incumbent upon you to watch it. Aninami tchilas asiyos lenesek umamoincha ushmirasan alecha. So, to Gemara, elad loyafkarinu. So then maybe it's speaking where these packages were not hefker, and there they can't be bar if bar has to be hefker. So Dr. Lishmuel, it's still a problem because Shmuel holds that you could be mechuyev per bar even on something that belongs to you. Lishmuel the Amar Kulomi Bar Lamadnu Hainu Bar. So the Gemara said according to Rav that this doesn't fit into the category of bar. There you could say this type of arrangement where you had avnus kinum that you were not mafkir, blew off a roof and it caused damage. But according to Shmuel, that's also a classic case of bar. So how is Shmuel going to interpret the words of the Mishnah of Atzara Shovish Avahen? What is that going to add to the list? Let's say speaking where you were mafkir. So the question is, then isn't that a bar? We would not consider this a bar. You know why? Malabar shekin ein koyach achar mu'uravai. A bar does not have any other koyach mixed into it. There's no wind that's pushing it around. A bar is just a standalone hazard. That's the tight parameters that any nezek has to meet in order to be classified as bar. But these needed wind to assist them in falling off the roof. Taimer bahani shekoyach achar mu'urav behen. And therefore, I'm sorry? Yes, but how did they get there? You left it on the roof, right? You left it on the roof.
You have to dig it out.
No, but you left it already in a place where it was hazardous. A regular bar, b'shus harabim, you left it, you did your digging in a place where it's hazardous. But when you left your packages on the roof, you left it in a place where it wasn't hazardous. You needed a koyach acher combined with you're not tying it down properly to deliver it to the destination where it was going to do the damage. The fact that it has koyach acham werben is not a reason to say that it should be potter. I'll prove it to you. Eish is also koyach acham werben. It's not doing it all by itself. Yet the Torah is still machai. Mala eish shekindartoi leilech ulhazik. Eish goes to the customer and delivers the damage there. This used koyach acher and then stopped and waited for someone to trip over it. Bar tochiach v'chazar adin. So this is exactly what we learn at Tzara Shavush Shabehen. What do these nezikin have in common? She darkan lahazit u'shmiras nalecha. We're referring to this case exactly, this hybrid case where you have packages that you were mafker. They were not properly fastened down on your roof. They blew off your roof and fell onto the ground, and then someone tripped over them. So that doesn't fit neatly into any package. It doesn't fit neatly into bar because it doesn't fit neatly into eish because these waited for the victim to come to it. So since it's somewhere in the middle, that is the tzara shovish to add this case. Sure. Or he lit a fire. What if he had a bonfire? He didn't light it?
So he has to have lit the fire before.
I don't know. Well, I guess when we learn the Gemara that focuses on Eish, maybe there'll be some case where there's a fire that I didn't light that I might also be responsible. We'll have to see when we get there. Because the pasuk says kisei Eish, if a fire goes out and damage. I don't think it says kisaver Eish, but I don't know. I'm not a biblical scholar. We'd have to see the Gemara when the Gemara delves into the Hezek of Eish. Rav Omar lasuya bar miskalgal. Bar miskalgal is actually a pretty fascinating subject. Lasuya bar miskalgal. You know, they said the gift that keeps on giving. So that's what a bar miskalgal is. It's a gift that keeps on giving. V'ragli adam v'ragli behema. So someone, Dr. Rashi, bar miskalgal, you negligently left your rock in your Rabbim. But when it remained in the place where you left it, it didn't do damage. So you could say, I didn't leave anything in a dangerous position. Where I left it, it's not going to damage. But the Gilgala Ragli Adam of Behema Lamakamacher. As people walk by, they kick that stone, and that stone gets bounced around from place to place. If you've ever heard of the saying, kick the can down the road, so they kicked the rock down the road, and eventually it landed in a place where someone did get hurt. So, hey Chidami Frektim, Ida Afkarinu, if the person that put the rock there was Mafki the rock, that would be the regular case of bar, even if it's misgalgal, even if it's not in that same place, it's still bar. It's a menace to society as soon as it's down there. And you're responsible for it. We're going to go through the same shackle of Ataya. So that only helps you for Rav. But L'Shmuel Dharma Kulam Ibari Lamad Hainu Bar. Zog Gemara Loilam Dafkarinu, you were Mavkarit. And at first glance, it should be exactly bar. But V'loidami Labar. You know why? Because Malabar Shekain Mais of Garmulai. Rashi says, what does the Mais of Garmulai mean? Kriyasai. You're digging the bar, Garma as a hazard. Alva Mais of Shalzeh, but his Maisim, just by leaving a rock in Rosh Hashanah, Lo Yizika. That didn't cause the damage. It's the people. I shouldn't be liable. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't put anything in a dangerous place. The people kicked it. So they should have been careful not to kick it. So why should I be chayiv? Timer bahani she'ein ma'asim garmulai. Here, my ma'asim leaving that rock where I left it was not a hazard. Zok Gemara shor yerchi. Because shor, I didn't. So ein ma'asim bailam garmu ezik. By a shor, there's nothing what the bailam did that triggered the shor to go goring people. It just means that my property did damage. And this doesn't go to the victim comes to it. This bara miskalgal is something in the middle. It's something in the middle, and therefore, we need it from the tzara shava shabbat. So there's a very big shiloh over here. Who is chayiv? Who is chayiv? Is the person who kicked it around chayiv, or is the person who unleashed it chayiv? So there's actually a long tosfos that discusses in part this question as well. So tosfos discusses over here. Tosfos discusses a girsa that Rashi rejected. If we look at Rashi says that there was a girsa in the Gemara that asked, if the rocks did damage as they were being kicked around, then that's koyach. So Rashi says, like Garcinan. I don't think we should be gurs that. Like we were gurs, Hechadami the Afkar ben Rav and the Shmuel. So Tosfos entertains that girsa that Rashi rejected. Let me just see what time it is, if we have time to do it. Yeah, we have a little bit of time. The Tosfos says, "B'chol asvarim kosuv ibahadi de kaazli kamaski koichayu." That's what That's what the Svar Margaris, but Rashi didn't like that. Girsha, as we just saw in Rashi, Pirsha Kundris to Lagoris lay. But Taima, why did Rashi reject that Girsha? Mishum Darminu Lekamon Bamaniach. In Darkin Shal Bnei Adam, Lisbanim Bedrochim. The way Rashi wants to learn the Girsa must have been, if it damaged Derech Halichoson, so then the person who kicked it should be chayav for it, because you kicked something that hit somebody else. So the reason why Rashi rejected that is because Ein Darkim Shal Bnei Adam Lisbanim Bedrochim. When you're walking down the street, it's not incumbent on you to look at everything you're walking if you kick something by mistake. You're liable for allowing something of yours to fall into Rosh Hashanah. But to suggest that somebody walking down the street that innocently kicks something as he's walking because he's not watching his feet to see that there should be nothing in his way, that's not a reason to be mechayiv anybody. What about the fellow who dropped it there in the first place? He shouldn't be mechayiv mitam adam amasik. Ella mishum dechashav karuch mitzuya. If anything, he should only be mechayiv because getting kicked around would also be considered like a ruch mitzvah, because that's normal. You drop something into Rosh Hashanah, it's going to get kicked around. Bava Eishai, it would be Eish. But Taishus, I still disagree with Rashi. I still feel we could salvage that girsa. The le'inyan kidei shelo yelchu kol kach b'choizik to yatizu v'yaziku. That is darker l'sbayin shaper. When you're walking casually, what's the chances that you're going to kick something very far? Not so likely. So therefore, you could give liability to a person who's walking down the street with such purpose that anything in his way is going to go flying. That's something that maybe a person could be liable. That's why in the Girsa that Rashi rejected, the Gemara said, if a guy kicks it as he's walking, it's koichai v'yischayv hamagalgal hakoil. The kicker should be, that's the kicker. The kicker should have to pay for everything, v'loy bal hatakol. That's how Tosfos wants to suggest could be shot in the Girsa if we didn't reject it. The Alval Gav, the Lagabi Kelab Shanot Lacharar Valaf Lagadish. If a Kelab took a Harar and went to a Godish and therefore lit it on fire, Porach Gemara, the Lachai Balag Achelas Nami to Balatakol. There the Gemara asked that the Balag Achelas should be Chai. Why should he be Chai if he didn't do anything? Hainim Mishum the Kelab Lav Bardeyu. That's because if a dog takes the hazard that I left, a dog has no liability, it has no das. Or hamagalgal bardeyahu. If a guy kicks it deliberately because he's not looking and he's walking with strength, that he's kicking things far, there's a place to pin some liability on him. Bardeyu. Teda. What if you light a fire? And someone else comes and burns his friend's talis in a fire that someone else created. And then I pushed someone's shore into that bar. Surely there's no svar to say that the balabar should be chayiv, even though he made that menace, because l'maisa the damage came from the second person who pushed the animal in. So you see the fact that there's a bardas involved, that will transfer liability. So I made the same bar. If an animal pushed an animal in, then I'm going to be chayiv. But if a human pushed an animal in, I'll be potter. Why? Because there's someone of das to transfer the liability to. So now Tosfos wants to suggest maybe there'll be liability on both of them. Bala behema u bal hatakala. V'hadar min l'kaman b'per kapara. Shor v'adam. Shedach v'elabar. Le'inyin nizokin kulan chayovin. The mashma afilu balabar, it's mashma even the balabar is chayiv. If someone pushed him into the bar, why should I be chayiv? Someone bumped into somebody nonchalantly. There, we're going to put all the liability on the balabar. But when there's someone else who actually was actively involved in the damage, we're going to pin some on him. Okay. So that's what I wanted to bring out from here, that there's actual liability in a bar miskalkul. Means if I do something, I leave a rock and it rolls and causes damage because some other thing out of my control happens, we still pin the liability on the original guy. So believe it or not, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says you learn Bava Kama, you think it's abstract. He says, when I walk into a makolet, when I walk into a grocery store, I see the whole Bava Kama over there. And there was a shaila that came to him, a fascinating shaila, and I'm not sure I understand exactly what his tshuva was, but I'm going to share it with you, and let's see if we can make heads or tails out of it together. A woman goes to the makolet and says, I need a bag of sugar. Or she said, I need a bag of salt. Let's say I need a bag of salt. And she was given an unmarked bag and was told by the store owner, here's your bag of salt. And she used it to put into her cholent. I'm sorry. She was planning, she used it to put into her cholent, but then she figured out that it wasn't salt, it was actually sugar. So you might say, I'm a grandma. The store owner is really a grandma. I gave you the wrong thing. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach held that this was called Borim Esgalgal. Does the store owner have to pay for damaging the cholent?
This is what? What's the terminology?
Bor HaMesgalgal. So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said it's not grandma. This is Bor HaMesgalgal. If you put a takola in place, you're going to be liable even for secondary things that it causes. That's not grandma. That's Bor HaMesgalgal. We have packages. The only story that I can think of is I remember in the olden days where before we had sanctioned and organized smuggling in of kosher alcohol into Canada through sacramental ways, it would be very hard sometimes to get wine into Canada. So what a very prominent family here in Toronto did, and when I mean prominent, I don't mean prominent wealth-wise, I mean prominent Torah-wise. One of the senior poskim of our city, his children used to get kedem to take wine bottles and put grape juice stickers on them. That's a huge no-no in the Food and Drug Administration, mislabeling product. And one day he told me he was in the airport in Pearson. Okay, he was in the airport in Pearson, and he had, don't worry, it was discovered. I'm not revealing any secrets. He was in the airport in Pearson with this case of grape juice that he was declaring, and by mistake he dropped it. The whole airport was smelling the wine, and it was labeled as grape juice. Needless to say, Kedem was no longer willing to do that for him. But the truth is, Kedem never did it, of course. It was done after market, somebody must have done. Kedem would never do anything like that.
I mean, it's interesting. Many agreements, legal agreements, when seek to limit the liability of the seller to the value of the object and not any follow-on damages that might come through the object not working.
And that's acceptable. In a contract, you could do anything you want.
I'm saying so like in many software agreements, it says, if the software fails,
Rabbi Sai, someone read it. Someone read it.
I read the contracts. So
you done already?
So it must stand to reason that if it didn't say that there would be liability that goes beyond. Otherwise,
even in common law, it accepts the Gemara's approach that without intervention, avada you're mechuyev for a grama of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I would think that would be the case. Otherwise, why would they seek to limit it in the contract?
Right, that's right, because if there's going to be a lawsuit, the lawyer shouldn't have a time.
I hear. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, every time I breathe on my camera, it goes dead. So now it's back up again. Zoktim Rav Ada bar Ava. Now that I used up all my spare time, we'll get moving. Rav Ada bar Ava Omar Lasuye Hodatan. The Tzara Shavashubhen is also coming to add another item to the list that we otherwise would not have known. Kol Elu Sha'amur Poiskin Bibaisayim V'Garfin Marasayim V'Moisacham. The halacha is that people have their own septic tanks, and from time to time they need to drain them, and they have to drain them into Rosh Hashanah. They didn't have a proper drainage system, so from time to time there was a grace period where people were allowed to dump their bibaisayim and their marasayim. Rashi says marasayim. The garfin marasayim means their septic tanks. The bibaisayim, Rashi says, are their dirty water. So they had sanitary and they had sewer, right? There's two different pipes in our homes that we connect to the sewer system, right? Sanitary, your regular water for the regular sinks, and then there's a toilet. They're actually connected.
No, it's storm and sanitary.
Oh, it's storm and sanitary. Oh, so sanitary
Yeah,
all sinks as well.
All your gray water and black water all go together.
So there, they had a little bit of a different separation. There was the zevel by itself, and garfin, they did it with a shovel. It didn't just get flushed down. So there was somebody who had a great job. It's funny because in Yiddish, when you refer to a graf is like a poritz, like a nobleman. But a goyref is a very difficult profession to do. Okay, so you have the garfin Marcel
The container
is a graf solei.
And for the water.
Valapuritz is a graf.
And the other one is called Ovich Mayr. It's the
Right.
container, but this has to.
So normally you wouldn't be allowed to dump your waste onto the Rosh Hashanah, but they did allow them. They did allow them. In the summer, where the roads are nice and clean, you can't just dump all your garbage on the road. You wouldn't be allowed to do that. But b'moshach shamim, where anyway everything's muddy and icky, there yesh lamershus. But that doesn't mean you don't have liability. You're allowed to do it. You don't get a ticket. But aval pisher b'rishus imeziko chayav and l'shalom. So you see from here that the chiyuv to pay has nothing to do with the fact that what you did was usher. It could be 100% sanctioned for you to release your waste, but you're still chayav al tzbor. If the contents of these things that you're cleaning out directly sprays on somebody, that's adam amazet, as Rashi says, adam. That's before in the Mishnah. I dirtied up the road and it's all muddy and smelly, and now someone gets dirty from it. If it was hefker, bein l'rav bein l'shmuel hanubar. Mike no bar the tchilas asiyas l'nezek u'mamoincha u'shmir aser lecha. Hani nami tchilas asiyas l'nezek u'mamoincha u'shmir aser lecha. El lo yafkerinu l'shmuel dar mekol mi bar l'mad no hanubar. Dr. Gemara lo olam davkerinu. Really, the owner was mafkrid, but still v'loy dami labar. Why? Malabar shekain shaloi rishus. A bar is done without permission. You're not allowed to build a bar. It's a violation. You get a ticket for building a bar, which just happened. Timer behind the rishus. Here, you might think you wouldn't be mechuyev for it. Why? Because it was sanctioned. You're allowed to do it. So you might think you shouldn't be mechuyev for such a damage. So you're allowed to have a shor. You're allowed to have your animal run around. Let you still chayiv. So you see, liability has nothing to do with whether or not you had a right to do what you did or not. Shor has a chumrah because Shor goes to the victim to deliver his damages. So this is another thing that we could learn from a Tzad Ravina Amar. What if you have a tree in your property or a wall that fell over into Rishus Harab? And they caused damage. Potter mila shalom, you're potter from paying. What if the city inspectors came by and saw this tree looks like it's going to fall down any day, and your wall as well? They issued an order, you must cut this down or take this down before it causes a hazard. And you were given 30 days, and it fell before the 30 days expired. You're still going to be potter. But if you neglected to correct the hazard within the time frame that was given to you by the city, then chayiv you'll be chayiv. So what is the case? Ida afker, if you were mafker this wall, bein l'rav, bein l'shmuel, hainu bar, it will be a bar. Maishna bar, the zekei motzai, ushmirasai alecha. Why is the difference between bar and this? Bar is a zekei motzai. It's a menace to society. You're responsible to watch it. Haninami is zekei motzai, ushmirasai alecha. And Ida lo yafkerinu, it's the same thing as before. L'shmuel, the amar kul mi bar l'mad, hainu bar. Really, you were mafkir. It's still not comparable to bar, because malabar when a bar is created, it's a menace to society. When you build a wall, when you plant a tree, that's not a menace to society. So at the end of the day, from this tzara shaveh shebehen, we actually harvest a whole series of halachas, right? We harvest according to Bayai, Avnos Ekinu Masoy that fell down. According to Shmuel, we not according to Shmuel, according to Rava, we harvest a Bor HaMeskalgel from this information. According to Rabbi Bar Ava, we harvest the case where you were allowed to release your refuse into the Rishus HaRabim, Poshkin B'Besem, the Garfin Marisayan, and according to Ravina, it's talking about a wall or a tree that fell down after you got your order to remove it. Okay, Gavalta.
How did the bottom go get there in the first place?
Someone put it there. You put your rock there
Then it's a regular bar. Why is it different?
because it didn't damage. The damage when I put it there, it wasn't dangerous. No one tripped over it. It's only because someone kicked it.
The same way that when you dig the pit, you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to put down anything in the pit.
But wherever I put it, it wasn't dangerous. So just because I'm not allowed to do it doesn't mean I'm chayiv, and just because damage was caused, just because I'm allowed to do it doesn't mean I'm puzzled. Okay, Dr. Gemara Vayter. Now we're going to switch gears a little. The Mishnah says, "Kishehizik chava mazik l'shalom tashlumi nezek b'meitav haaretz." So Dr. Gemara, what does it mean? Kishehizik chava mazik. Chava mazik chayiv hamazik miboilei. Isn't the normal way to express chayiv by saying chayiv? And Tosfos, I believe, elaborates and says chav is always referring to somebody else. It's chav lacherim, right? The word chav is generally used when we're talking about doing it for somebody else. But when we're talking about yourself, it should say chayiv. Amarav, Hai Tana Yerushalmihu. When Rebbe quoted the Mishnayos, sometimes he actually didn't paraphrase. He quoted the word for word the Tana whose view he's quoting. And maybe this Tana was a Yerushalmi, and this is how they speak. The Tana listen to Klila, they like using very concise words. So they say chav instead of chayiv, and he just quoted him word for word. Yeah. Lasham Tashlumi Nesek. So now we're going to get into how Meitav works. Hanurabanan. Meitav Sadeyu Umeitav Karmoy Yishalim. The Torah says if your item causes damage, and I believe it says this by Shem Verregel, the mazik has to pay Meitav Sadeyu Umeitav Karmoy Yishalim, which is unclear because is it Meitav Sadeyu Shal Nizik Umeitav Karmoy Shal Nizik, as Divrei Rabbi Shmuel says? So we don't care what type of property the mazik has. We care what type of property the nizik has. And I have to give the nizik property that's equivalent to the best type of property that he owns. Now, that doesn't mean that even if I don't own such property, that I have to go buy it. That's not what it means. It means, what if I have even better property than the nizik? I don't have to give my best. I have to give from my inventory what would be equivalent to the nizik's best. And I want to highlight loy ba'akosov seems to indicate that Rabbi Kiva is arguing with Rabbi Shmuel and he's trying to be makel. Loy ba'akosov, the pasuk only came ela ligvois l'nizakin mina idis. It's a little bit unclear what Rabbi Kiva is talking about because Rabbi Shmuel also said mina idis. So what does he mean? The kavachaymer lahektish. So we're going to have to see what this means. Let's have a look at Rashi. And the reason why I'm highlighting that it's not clear what Rabbi Kiva said, because the Gemara's kasha is going to be soon. To learn Pshat and Rabbi Kiva the way we're about to learn. Maybe there's other ways to interpret Rabbi Kiva. But first, let's see how the Gemara now is interpreting Rabbi Kiva. So Rashi's filling in what it doesn't say at all in Rabbi Kiva's words. All he said was, and then he made a secondary comment, the Kalvachaymer Lehek. So let's see what Rashi says again. Rabbi Kiva says it's not Idish Shal Nizik, it's actually Idish Shal Mazik. It's Shaman Aruga Shal Nizik, Lefi Mashtahi. We assess the value of the row of the Nizik Lefi Mashtahi. So let's say it's determined that the damages was $1,000. The Mazik Baliten Karka, if the Mazik doesn't want to pay cash, rather he wants to give the Nizik a piece of property, he has to take a property worth $1,000, but from the best of the properties that he owns, Shava Oisendam. Let's leave that because that's a completely different direction. Frank the Gemara, I don't understand. Pashab Shan and Rabbi Shmuel. Let me go back to the words because I touched it like the Maskana, but the Gemara is going to process it. Mate of Sadeu, mate of Karmi Yishalim, mate of Sadeu Shonizik, mate of Karmi Shonizik. The Gemara here thinks that Rabbi Shmuel is saying that even Achal Shmeina, Mishalim Shmeina, I'm sorry, let's say an animal eats from a Shvacha row. Let's say the pears in this row weren't so good, they were only worth $500. Rabbi Shmuel is saying you have to pay back with the mate of the Nizik. You have to look at the best row that this Nizik has in his field, and you have to pay a row of the best field, which means you're really paying a greater damage than that you caused. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Shmuel, I understand if he ate the most expensive row, that's what he should pay damages for. But if he only ate a row that was worth $500, why should he have to pay $1,000, which is a premium over what he actually damaged? People are going to invite people to damage their property. They double their money, right? The animal ate a row, but we cannot identify the quality of that row. We don't know. We don't know what it. No one has a picture of exactly what it was before he ate it. So there, Rabbi Shmuel is saying, if you don't know what he ate, then you have to pay the best that's there. Right? If you don't have your ticket, you have to pay for a whole day. Right? That's how it works. If you lose your parking ticket, you got to pay for a whole day. If we were sure that the shor ate kusha, we wouldn't charge a premium and make the mazik pay more than the value of the produce that his animal actually ate. So hashad lo yadinan ikusha achal ishmeina achal mishalim shmeina. Just because we don't know what he's penalized, don't we have a rule on moitzim mechaveri all of haraya? So this is one of the rayas that hamoitzim mechaveri all of haraya, which is the overpowering rule in any monistic dispute, is not a pasuk. It's a pasuk to svara. The Gemara is saying the svara is that if you want to claim money from me, it's incumbent upon you to prove that I owe you the money. So what is Pshat in Rabbi Shimon? What is Pshat in Rabbi Shmuel? I apologize. Avada, you only have to pay the value of what you damaged. If your animal ate $1,000 worth of fruit, that's what you'll pay. If your animal ate $500 worth of fruit, that's what you'll pay. And I'm not speaking accurately when I say $500 worth of fruit or $1,000 worth of fruit, because that's not how you assess it at all. You don't assess it based on the market value of the fruit. You assess it based on the market value of the property with the fruit and without the fruit. But that's a whole different sugya. I just don't like speaking inaccurately. That you're only paying the dollar value of what you damaged. The question here is, what type of property do you use to pay for that dollar value? The best quality properties that the nizik had was the worst quality property that the mazik has. And the question is, do you have to pay the best of the nizik, meaning the mazik can just give his worst stuff, because that's equivalent to the best of the nizik, or does the mazik has to give his own best stuff? Rabbi Shmuel Savar b'd nizik shamina, and therefore the mazik gets away easy. He can give his lowest grade property because that's still equivalent to the highest grade property that the nizik has. Rabbi Kiva Savar b'd mazik shamina. No, you have to give your own best property. My time with Rabbi Shmuel. Where did Rabbi Shmuel get this from? The teretz is nemer soda lamata, meaning it says we made of sadeu, we made of karma yishalim. The nemer soda lamala, where it says ubir b'steyacher, when it talks about the damages that were inflicted. My soda ha'amar lamayla b'nizik. When it says ubir b'steyacher, whose field are we talking about? We're talking about the field of the victim. Av soda ha'amar lamata, when it says made of sadeu yishalim, it's referring to the same field referenced earlier, the nizik. And that's why you only pay idus of the nizik. Kivas over made of sadei who made of karmo yishalem, made of whom the heich the kamashalim. You take the best of the payer's property, and therefore, if the mazik has properties that are on the higher grade than even the highest grade property that the nizik has, he has to pay with that property. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Shmuel also has to admit that Meitav Sadeu has some type of connotation that it's the payer's Meitav. That also has to have some application. Rabbi Shmuel, Hanik Zer Shava, Hanikra. We actually can sometimes apply what the Gzer Shava teaches us, which is the Meitav of the Nizik, but there will be instances where there will be Meitav of the Mazik. And how does this play out? Hanik Zer Shava Kidekamin. Like we explained, if the best of the Nizik was equivalent to the worst of the Mazik. Hanikra, where does the Mazik have to give his best property, even though it's better than the best property of the Nizik, is Kagoin the Isla Mazik Idis Viziburis. The Mazik has grade A and grade C. The Idis Lenizik, the Nizik has grade B. So the Mazik has A and C, and the best that the Nizik has is B. Viziburis to Mazik Loishava Ke Idis the Nizik. My grade C property as the Mazik is not as good as the level B that the Nizik has. So do I get to downgrade and give him my C, or must I upgrade and give him my A? Zokt Rabbi Shmuel, even I will agree, the Mishalim Lei Mimetav Didei. The Lemotzi Amrlei, I have no right as the Mazik to tell the Nizik, Ta'at Govi Miziburis, take my Ziburis, which is my grade C, Elagovi Mimetav, I have to give you my grade A. So there it would be relevant, Metav Sadeu Yishalim, pay the best of the Mazik's property. He can give the grade B. That's right. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Loi Ba'akasav.
So Rabbi Kiva is still Machman, right?
So far, Rabbi Kiva is still being Machmer. He's being Machmer on the Mazik. That's right. Zok to Gemara. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Loi Ba'akasav, Ela Ligvoish L'Nezakin Minoidis. V'Kal V'Chomer L'Hektish. What does it mean, Kal V'Chomer L'Hektish? My Kal V'Chomer L'Hektish. What is there, Kal V'Chomer to Hektish, that a Nezakin pays Idis? That doesn't make any sense at all. Let's take a case of damages. My ox gored Haktish's ox. There, you know how much you pay? Zero. You pay zero. Because it says, Kiyigav Shar is Eshar Re'eyu. Shar Re'eyu Omer Rachmana, V'lo Shar Shalaktish. So that can't be the case that we're comparing it to, because in fact there's no payment due at all. It's not even speaking about a discussion of damages, because Hektish is completely mufka from the parsha of damages. Someone promises a mana to Bedekabais, and he doesn't pay up. The Gizber comes, and he could seize property of this person who made the donation and didn't fulfill it. The Shakal Mayidis. So maybe that's the Kavachimer Lahektish, Kavachimer, that if a Balchoiv has to pay, it is Kavachimer that when the Gizber is collecting money that's owing to the base of Mikdash, the Gizber can take from it. How could you possibly justify that? Lo Yehei Ela Balchoiv. Why is he different than any Balchoiv that owes money? Ubalchoiv b'beininis, and a Balchoiv is beininis. Why should Hektish get more? What possible source can you have that by Hektish, who's just money a regular Choiv, should be able to take more than beininis? The Chitema Sava Rabbi Kiva Balchoiv Nami Be'idis, and if you want to say, no, Rabbi Kiva holds that all Balchoivs could collect Idis. Then Ikal Mikvach, I can ask you a kasha, just because a Balchoiv collects from Idis, from a regular private person, who said Hektish would also be able to. Ikal Mikvach, Mal Balchoiv, you can't learn like Akzer Shava. If you collect Beinis as a Balchoiv, Hektish also gets to collect Beinis. Because Hektish is worse than our Balchoiv. Because a Balchoiv, if he does damage, doesn't have to pay Hektish a penny. So maybe the rights of Hektish vis-a-vis a regular person are less than the rights of a person vis-a-vis a person. So just because Rabbi Kiva holds a regular Balchoiv collects from Idis, who said that Hektish would be able to collect from Idis? Hektish, Shahura Koiche bin Zakin? Zak Gemara la'olam, I'll tell you what Rabbi Kiva meant when he said the Kavachomer lahektish, that they also pay from Idis. It's the Nogach Tura Didan Latura de Hektish. We had a problem, you're a potter in Gantin. Udika Kashaloch, Shore Eyu, Omer Achmana, Aloy Shor Shalaktish. We have a Shita who holds that when you do damage to Hektish, you have to pay anyway. And Rabbi Kiva is saying, what do you pay? You pay my idis. Rabbi Kiva Savar Lach, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Shor shal hektish, shenogach shor shal hedjit. If a shor shal hektish killed a shor shal hedjit, potter, it would be potter. So Re'eu just excludes hektish from being liable to pay, but it doesn't exclude hektish from collecting. But shor shal hedjit, shenogach shor shal hektish, not only do you have to pay, but bein tam, bein muad, mishalom mezek shol. Yad hektish is always al hal yoim. So now we can decipher what Rabbi Kiva meant. Rabbi Kiva said that you pay from the idis of the mazik, the kavachomer hektish, and surely by hektish, where you damage hektish, you would have to pay back the damages to hektish if you're not using cash with idis. Break the Gemara. Now that you've established that Rabbi Kiva has a whole new shita that is different than everybody else, and that if you damage hektish, you're mechuyev to pay. Let's go back to Rabbi Kiva's original words. It was never clear from Rabbi Kiva that he was really arguing about Rabbi Shmuel's approach to idis and ziburis and beinis. What did Rabbi Kiva say? All he said was, Rabbi Shmuel talked about that you pay the idis. It was only Rabbi Shmuel who said that. What was Rabbi Kiva's response? Rabbi Shmuel said, "Meit of sedei shal nizik, meit of kaim shal nizik." Rabbi Kiva didn't say shal mazik. All he said was loy ba kosov ela ligvay shal nizakim in idis. He never said mazik. So how do you know b'chalal that Rabbi Kiva is even arguing with Rabbi Shmuel about what you said that you pay idis shal mazik? Maybe all Rabbi Kiva was saying is that by hektish you also pay. That's all he was arguing about. I agree with Rabbi Shmuel about idis shal nizik. I'm just telling you, you hold hektish doesn't get to collect if someone damages hektish. I hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe that hektish gets to collect. Maybe that's all Rabbi Kiva is bringing to the table. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, mimai de beidis tenizik. V'ziburis the mazik pligi. Dilma the chula amo b'nizik sheminon. Everybody holds you only pay nizik. Idis of the nizik. V'hacha bepluked Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe v'Rabbanan kamifli. All Rabbi Kiva is making a note is you, Rabbi Shmuel, hold that you don't pay hektish if you damage hektish. I only do, and it'll have the same halacha. Rabbi Kiva is over. Let me finish. Rabbi Kiva is over Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. Rabbi Shmuel is over Rabbanan. Correct the word that also would not fit into the words of Rabbi Kiva, because in Cain, my loy bo hakosov. Loy bo hakosov means the mashma the bekra gufei pligi. It's mashma. He's arguing about this pasuk of meit of sedeu. According to this pshat, Rabbi Kiva is arguing about something completely different. It has nothing to do with the discussion of meit of sedeu. So, in Cain, my loy bo hakosov, the mashma the bekra gufei pligi. The loy bo hakosov lachi. I disagree with you. The pasuk of meit of sedeu doesn't mean this. It means that. Here, if the discussion is only about whether or not you're mechuyev to pay hektish damages, that wouldn't be a good expression. And the second problem is va'oid my kavachomer hektish. The whole thing doesn't make sense. The svara is that hektish should be more chomer, not more kill, right? The svara is hektish should be more chomer, not more kuludik. But Rabbi Shmuel is presenting a kuludik approach to meitav. It's not meitav of the mazik; it's a meitav of the nizik. So what do you mean kavachomer hektish? Kavachomer hektish you can use if you're making hektish more chomer, not if you're making it kill. So there's a third problem. Amar Rabashi, this is the easiest problem to understand. No cheshbon. Rabashi says black and white, you're wrong. Amar Rabashi, Tanya behedya, meit of sadeyu, meit of karmi yishalom, meit of sadeyu shal nizik, meit of karmi shal nizik, divrei Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva Omer, meit of sadeyu shal mazik, meit of karmi shal mazik. We know for a fact that's the machlokes. So for Dreinachnish can cup with Lakshan Torah, it's black and white what Rabbi Kiva's position is. Okay, we will stop here. Okay, I love getting to the two dots.
But some of the loibu akus is two different positions. Here's my and daughters should I either.